So good morning or afternoon wherever you are. Welcome to another edition of Alone at Samahita. I really am on my own here. It's just me and the camera and you. And the beautiful nature out there. So the aim today is to go more into some questions about practice and hopefully reflecting and thinking on those bits of practice. Add to your own contemplations, your own way of breathing, your own way of practicing, and so on. So before I get into any questions, I just want to refer to that, a time of practice. And what I'm reminded of at the moment are time periods I've had in the past 20 plus years, where I suppose me as an individual was removed from the general society, somewhat isolated, and in a focus on practice. And it had a positive spin to it, meaning I suppose it was voluntary, no mass control, shutdown, etc. But the point is that the situations now and those individualized times are the same, not different. In terms of you having an interest to go a little bit deeper with practice. So what you have now is a time opportunity. We're all working. My days are actually quite full. Doing a variety of things, especially study, writing, etc. after this. But the morning time, especially without being coming down and actively teaching, etc., is gotten again rich, like those periods alone in practice. And as you have that, just like water, continuous rain, being able to go deeper into the soil, you have this opportunity, compounds day after day, to go deeper, deeper, and deeper in. And that's really how practice works. Otherwise, you do a bit and you keep up a sort of a standard rationed bit and hope that something's going to shift in it. And that isn't bad for daily management to some degree, but when there's an opportunity, and there is now, seize it, to go to a place that would almost be impossible to get at if we weren't presented with such an opportunity right now. And within that, so for instance, a couple of weeks ago when I did the meditation on fear, now is that opportunity to observe what's coming up and face it. And perhaps these times, this situation, etc., brings more up that a normal time, normal practice, even though you're very dedicated and so on, is unable to bring up. And that's really the line of opportunity here. One of my favorite, you could say, teachers, who's of course deceased, passed, long gone, but one of the early Thai forest Buddhist monks, Ajahn Mun. And so with some of his, you could say anyone who was with him at that point was quite in it, quite adept at practice, quite dedicated, but still, they had their challenges, they had their blocks. But he would put them in a situation, or guide them, encourage them to spend their night meditating in a situation that is fear-producing. So, if it was the forests of Thailand, two things they're afraid of: tigers and ghosts, right? And that's a conditioning, it's a social conditioning, though tigers, pretty rational one. So the point is to be out in a sitting, in your practice, in a situation where really it comes down to two things. All your attention goes outside to some object, which is the source of trigger for your fear, and you just remain in the same circle or worse. Or you go and put all your attention on that fear sensation that's happening, and you annihilate it. And really that's how many of those monks had their breakthroughs, had their awakenings, etc. So due to the intensity of the stronger sensations, experiences, it's a perfect opportunity to internalize on it. And take the morning, use that precious time, to indulge in that. and then get on with Zooms and Facebooks and meetings and taking care of kids and all that other stuff. So hopefully that makes sense. We'll just go into a couple of these questions. Some are coming up there. I don't know if I can read them because I'm live, but I have some that were sent in advance, so I'm going to deal with those first. So somebody did ask about pranayama for coronavirus, okay? And the truth is, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Okay, the truth is that coronavirus is novel, it's new, so no one has any idea what can work, when it can work, and how it can work, okay? So, but what I would say is, you know, if you had a very strong case of the flu, if you had a very strong case of a fever, etc., what would be the way to practice? So in that case, I don't really practice, right? It's rather about rest is needed, okay? Now, it depends on the severity of the symptoms. I could say, oh yes, you know, Vamandauti or Kapalabhati, they should be helpful at clearing the lungs, but then if that triggers a little more inflammation, then it wouldn't be a good thing, see? So this is where Kriyas, pranayamas become difficult to prescribe in such a situation, especially one that we're just figuring out. I could say, oh, Shitali is good, but maybe it's too cooling with an impact on the lungs, you see? So therefore it may not be good. Myself and Tawariji were having a talk about it a few weeks ago, and he was figuring, oh, do Surya Vedana, okay, as a right channel stimulator to at least reduce it or protect against catching it. So me, from the scientific mind, I prefer to focus on a ongoing preventative practice that keeps my immune system at least stronger, my respiratory system stronger, so at least there's less chance, theoretically, of getting it, and of its, if one does have it, of its experience being stronger, okay? The few accounts I've read of people with it, it seems to be very harsh and heavy on the system, tight in the chest, etc. So without a doubt, then resting and breath work, not pranayama per se, breath work is more effective. So lots of rest, and then you control the smoothness of the breathing in and out the nose, okay? So that your system at least is able to function at its healthiest and best to fight the infection, etc. Good, okay. So, and then there was another question on pranayama for bipolar and anxiety. Now, even following on from the last question, pranayama is what we might call a skilled practice. It has a specific purpose that's a little bit more in the meditative realm, what you might call the psychological development. And of course it involves the breath, it impacts physiology, so therefore you can see it as beneficial for health and other aspects. However, if I wanted to focus on, like in the previous question, a program that's mainly just about taking care of my system, health, etc., I don't need to identify pranayama. I'll look more at how to use the breath and in what situations and so on. Okay? And then it can actually be quite simple. You know, you spend some time with just one or two breath practices that may or may not involve a holding of the breath. Pranayama then becomes a bit more specific because it also highlights where your internal attention goes. And that's really important, especially from a spiritual point of view. So when it comes to pranayama for anxiety, pranayama for bipolar, well, without a doubt, one of its, you could say, main contributions, breath work to pranayama, is in its effect on the autonomic nervous system and its function, which basically means that as that becomes more resilient, your stress response is more resilient, how the functioning of this autonomic nervous setup inside of you in its own function, right, its own endogenous function, its own way of working, literally in your system, but of course connected with your brain, is more powerful, more resilient. So when it's not powerful, then there are more fluctuations. There's more propensity to suffer the ills that anxiety triggers, and then it's a vicious circle. So I go back to, okay, well, let me engage in particular practice and build this. So the video put out from last Monday and in the blog was about, just breath work in stressful times. So there's a way to start. Do you get that built in? I spoke of a quadrangular breath. Then from there, that already shows time, doing it, dedicated, and the regularity of the breath. And that definitely should impact how your basically have an autonomic response, how your system responds, which ideally dampens an anxiety effect. Then as you continue, and I would say continuing past breath work is getting into real pranayama practice, and then you want a more stable system, and the practice reinforces the stability of the system. And that's my experience coming from 20 years of daily practice on it. It builds over time, and I emphasize daily because it is something, you go through different things each day, and so then the effect of doing the practice impacts on that and counters the different situations you're up against each day. Now when it comes to something like bipolar, that is a lot trickier. And we cannot expect the practices of yoga to solve the ills, the issues, the challenges of a human life, right? So the yoga practice cannot change what's going on environmentally. But if it changes what's happening inside of you and how we as a group of people change our behavior in society, and even in the greater world, then there's an overall indirect effect, environmentally, socially, and so on. But it still comes back to the individual. Now, at the same time, over the years, I've had many people come and practice who are dealing with different challenges that require often medication, and it relates to either bipolar, depression, etc. So then it's can it be done? Yes. Is there a golden bullet, silver bullet even? No. But the way to approach again is to get good advice from a competent teacher and to start simple. It's not so much that, if I tell you to do Ujjayi and Shitali, it's going to solve that, because that is not true. Rather that you would do 1, 2, or 3 things, and the continuity of doing that has an impact on the system, on the psyche, you see? So really the lesson is more, how often do I do this, for how long, and how do I engage with it? And if you're getting good advice on do this breath, build it to that after a certain period of time, and then build it into such and such for pranayama practice, then that advice is fine, but it's only part of the equation of you committing to it, being regular at it. And then in my experience, personal experience, and watching others, these practices start to have a deeper impact through physiological effect and a certain amount of effect psychologically. And when you look at the definition of yoga, what it's getting at, to ultimately experience not this, experience more really who I am, then it's dealing with the psychological component primarily. And so the problem is we're dealing with the difficulty on our psychological level. So we have to step back one take good advice, which ideally is, oh, do this breath. And then I have to commit to that to almost get around this personal psychological difficulty. Okay? And none of it's easy. Okay? And again, with some of these questions, they become more relevant, specific when we're beyond social distancing, beyond isolation, being able to interact. I would say if anyone's not sure what to do, just follow the very simple base breath that's in this week's, as in last Monday's, video and article. Okay, breath work for stressful times. Get that down, and then we build onto it. If I had an anxiety attack, there's a few things I could do in the moment. My favorite is to be able to lay on the front, put the head down, and just take longer, deeper breaths till the anxiety effect decreases. But the next level is the training of breath into pranayama and then working with pranayama. And so, you know, if you haven't done any of that with us before, we'll aim to roll out some of those points in some of these sessions and some articles. Yes. So, if you're like, what did he say? Then just follow the breath described in the last one and build that. If you can stick to that, that's worth more than all these other things you learned years ago that you're not doing now. Okay? Great. There's two more questions that I have here, and I think there's a few coming up. Can you hear me? Saying the sound is very low. Okay. So, social versus individual, from Lil was asking me about. Well, I started this talk about the individual side. This is an opportunity to really optimize how you practice, and ultimately there's no way around it. That's how this stuff works. However, I'm a big believer in the group effect, the support of that. At the moment you can really only connect with that online, but ideally as things shift, you know, you're back in a group environment. Now, the pluses are that's connection, that's a group. It sort of raises the bar, so it gets me a bit more involved. And in the first few years of practice, I think that's key. And even asana can continue to go like that in a group setting. We of course have to train people, work with people in the breath and pranayama and meditative stuff in group. And then it's tricky, when do you go individual? When you stay group? Okay? Because you could just be sick of the group and want to be on your own. But you might be just falling into your own patterns. So is the group distracting? Or can I remove some of those triggers that the group gives me? Can I pay attention to them and get more into my own practice? So I would hope after this crisis shifts that we're back to freedom, where we can come together in groups, we can join, and maybe there's a different level of awareness and consciousness, right? But then ultimately this does come down to you, how you're doing it, how regularly you do it, and take the opportunities, whether it's current state of concern, fear, or the difficulty sitting in a group, take that as an opportunity to channel your attention inside even more. Okay? Because if you don't, it goes out more on the frustration and irritation. Right? There's no in between on that one. Okay? I hope that satisfies. Last question from here, and then I'll see what's written there. Is question about the third eye. Where is it? So, yes, because I had referred to in some previous teaching that the third eye is not here. Okay? And now, why then do people speak about between the eyebrows, etc.? Okay? So yes, in Hatha Yoga, tantric practice, you know, there is the drishti, Okay, Brumadhya, you know, here between the eyebrows. Now, in a two-dimensional sense, I would have to say it's between the eyebrows, but that's two-dimensional. But I am not two-dimensional. Hopefully, I'm not even three-dimensional. Okay, so, and personally, I've done this. I've had the opportunity to be in cadaver labs, assisting there, dissecting the corpses, etc. And I spend a lot of time analyzing even just how things come together. So really, if I went 3D, I'd have to put my finger through there and a finger through about here. And you're going to get to where the optic nerve, optic chiasm crosses. And in the middle of that is the infundibular stalk, right? What comes down to give you the pituitary gland. So about there, just above your soft palate, you've got this magic zone, okay? Which is like, right up here. So, and so then it's technically between the eyes, and it's where the optic nerve crosses. It's the pituitary below, and just above it, what is it? Mother herself, the hypothalamus, okay? And really the hypothalamus is the key controller, which is why I call it mother, of the entire autonomics, as well as multiple hormonal function in the body, you see? And then it does have projections to the pineal, which will take me further back here. And there is a stimulation of light on these areas. In fact, there are particular neurons in the eye that register light that impacts on the hypothalamus to the pineal, right? So this is a very interesting complex, and some of those specifics, at least in the scientific way, wouldn't have been known even 50 years ago, 100, thousands years ago, etc. But there was experience. Now, if you focus here, and in my early days I did that, and it's not good, it's not healthy, that actually causes problems. And if you anatomically observe here, it's really just frontal sinus. There are some nerves that go there. They're peripheral. They're not really of any consciousness benefit. Okay, consciousness benefit deep in here. So, and that's where, again, back to yogic language, when we speak of Brahmarandra. Okay, so the passage of Sushumna, inner centered experience, and is experienced right there. If you want to make it simple for yourself, and you want to think about third eye, have a very soft breath through your nose, and you let it touch at the soft palate. Because if you go a little bit beyond that, you are in the zone where the pituitary gland is. And then as the eyes cross, optic nerve crosses. And then the hypothalamus, which is at the floor of the brain. And the cavities in the brain are literally right above and below that area, you see. So all these things we do, the way we breathe, we have an impact on internal pressures. And those pressures are really the language of pranayama practice. So you could say higher levels of hatha practice. Ultimately, we're managing that internal pressure from the lower abdomen as it affects these spaces, literally spaces that do have a certain amount of fluid. And there, just like in any lab, these are like micro adjustments, and these micro adjustments are the experience one in practice starts to get, you see. If your attention's in the wrong place, you of course disturb or even throw that way off. And I did that before. Don't recommend it. So staying here is a futile event, and it's actually not of any value. It's worse. Going in is powerful. And really you need to look at three spots. The pelvic floor to the navel is one zone. Once the pelvic floor is grounded, then being in the navel, especially in all these hatha practices, is the key. The heart is in the other spot. And some of our practices, and especially just being able to open, right? Care, feel practices in the heart. And then there's some where we get more into the brain. So even some of the mantras have their effect here. While they at the same time simultaneously impact the heart. But here, when you get sort of deep in a contemplation and you're not distracted by anything else, you're there. And then when you let everything go quiet, so where does your attention set? Right? So ideally you end up in one of those three spots. But if you do end up in the head and looking for the third eye, don't be here. It's a misleading, almost trick, okay? And keep in mind what was written in older texts isn't it exactly properly translated and commented on, or that's put out there in certain books and texts, even by, you know, the swamis and pandits, whoever of previous from previous generations. However, when you really take a look at this stuff, you will see that some very experienced commentators and writers on this speak of Brahmarandra point, speak of those experiences. Of course, the best is have inner experience yourself, which is why we focus on practice. Okay, so I'll deal with one question here. It says, "Hi boss." That's good to know. "Find myself during this situation somehow quite difficult to calm and settle before starting my practice. Is any other effort and direction I can focus on?" So I'd have to know what you mean by your practice, and maybe you mean just pranayama, etc. If that's the case, a little bit of physical practice, you know. In fact, you need to do the Yogi Burpee Challenge. It's coming out on a video screen near you. But anyway, that aside, if your nervous system is a little bit off and when sitting it feels uncomfortable, distracting, etc., then do one or two sun salutes. Do a couple of poses that, I mean, they're there for a reason, okay? They impact your entire system, so then you can actually sit better. And then the Kriyas are actually quite powerful there too, you know. Personally, I would stand, nauli, sit, not sit, stand, nauli, do some moving salutes, etc., one or two poses, then into sitting and straight into something again that's got life to it and that causes me to focus, something like Kapalabhati, and then take it from there. And I have to catch myself. Where's my attention? Oh, back here, right? So it's a continuous process of that. And that is what practice is, okay? So, in other words, what can you focus on? You need to kind of shift what you put your effort into with practice, okay? In regards to Kapalabhati, sometimes I feel energized and more awake after doing it, and there are times where I would feel sleepy. Is that sleepiness an indication that I may not have done it correctly? Yes. Yes and no. Okay. You may be doing it okay, but I need to know your condition before you start it. Lydia, you got a baby at home. I know all that. So maybe notice when it happens. Did you have a more difficult night of sleep? Okay. 2 nights ago for me, I had no baby at home because I'm alone at Samahita. But whatever it was with the way the weather shifts and changes, it totally disturbed my sleep. So my practice the next morning had a heavier weight to it. I was still doing it correct, so to speak, but it had a heavier weight. Now, the interesting thing is I actually did extra when it came to something like you're asking Kapalabhati to shift my energy level, you see? And that energy lift and being able to rest and relax was really the panacea for an awkward off night of sleep, okay? So if you are just doing it and then feeling sleepy, if it is incorrect, your stroke is probably wrong, maybe your posture is wrong, you're doing it in a more of a heavy heavy downward manner. And you have to pay attention to all these things, right? How you manage the pelvic floor, how free the movement below the navel is, etc. These things make a difference, right? Again, I hope that helps from here. And somebody's asking about, can pranayama improve fertility? There's absolutely no proof that it can. There's anecdotal statements. And really, that again, that's a way bigger question. What are the, at least from the medical point of view, what are the reasons that are causing infertility? And is it in the male or the female, etc.? On a general level, what I can definitely say is, being a father already, is that I was very aware of my own health on all levels, including reproductive health, long before going towards having a baby. And that meant how I took care of myself diet-wise and what happens on a nerve level and circulation level. So for a male, these practices should definitely improve reproductive function in a circulatory sense and in a nerve strength. And if the problem is that back to sperm production and something irregular there, then we can't expect practice really to impact that. If it's more the functional cycle, these systems that are dependent on nerves and circulation, then yes, it could help. Okay, but again, it comes down to, well, how serious do you take that? Oh yeah, I'll do a bit of that, and then you kind of have to. Can't expect any of this to work. So to further answer your question, there would have to be a little bit more detail on the fertility aspect, infertility aspect. So, how often should we renew our prescription of pranayama practice? Every week. Okay. There's no fixed time. How often are you doing it? How regular are you doing it? Have you become mechanical in doing it and then you want to change it? So there's a few factors there, which is why there's usually a little bit more of an interaction between student-teacher on it. However, if you're kind of really in it, you're doing it and enjoying it, and you can kind of feel that benefit, then you should be getting some shifts somewhere in a 6 to 12 month period. It's worth checking in. And usually then, when somebody's that in it, it's also easier to just give that advice via an email. When one isn't in it as much, then of course the email is less effective, and being more in person is important. But even then, that's why we take a look at the pulse, what's going on, because at a certain point, pranayama, or all these hatha practices, asanas, just the support of pranayama in a way, and that's all hatha comes down to, in a way, they are introducing balanced, normalized, natural function back into your system. That which got lost and compromised over decades. And from that alone, you'd feel, wow, energized. You feel different. And your capacity to tune in is stronger. But then pranayama takes a different tone. You could say it's genuine purpose then, which is spiritual in nature. And that's when it becomes interesting between teacher and student. Okay? Because there's only so much one can keep talking about breath, pranayama, and health, etc. But it's what the majority need, and need to trigger. For those of you that are more dedicated, we have to look more at it in a very subtle, nuanced way. So, my case was of really, really, really practicing, and after a while of really getting into something and getting settled at it, then a certain question and what might come up, and then I would check in with the teacher. So I'll take another 4 or 5 minutes, seeing as there's a few more questions here. You don't have to stay, okay, but I hope you do. So from Mer, can I give some guidance on there needs to be a money exchange when teaching yoga? Given recent corona situation, the person asking the question has been hosting classes for the elderly neighbors. That's very nice. Who are in lockdown, but you're not charging. Is this wrong? I've been encouraging people to donate towards people affected by COVID. So I'm generating a sense of goodwill through the practice, but not asking for money directly. Yeah. When this is over, go to my PayPal account and everybody send me lots of money. Okay? Because Samahida's closed. Okay. Is it wrong? There's no wrong or right. Okay? In general, it's really about energy exchange. And even just giving classes without some kind of counter exchange usually doesn't produce the effect in the student who's attending. But we are in a slightly different time, and people are in controlled, isolated situations, so the appreciation and the sincerity factor goes up. So I'm quite happy to sit right here with the place closed, but still have to carry a staff and do this without even the thought of a charge or anything, right? Because it's about us staying connected. But the situation will change. We get back to the commerce of things, and really then it comes down to, well, what is fair, right? Because many places get overly commercial, and of course overcharge and overdo things and misrepresent. Sell, teacher trainings, everything, it's all about the buck. So instead, what am I given? How qualified am I? And is it fair? That's what this comes down to. And so if you're helping elderly people who are locked down from COVID, and you personally are financially fine, then I think a donation is great. But if I was back as I was 20 plus years ago, a teacher in New York, living week to week on the classes I taught, then I would be in a more difficult situation now, needing to, well, apart from government handouts, I'd have to shift platform, go to Zoom classes. The people on the Zoom side should be grateful, happy, and there still should be an exchange. I'm surviving, others are surviving in different ways, able to carry on work and business via the virtual platform. So when it comes, whether it's now or at other times, you assess the situation and is it fair? And that's the policy I've tried to have at Samahita. What is it that supports a community of 80, almost a Thai village here, that allows us to keep the place with integrity and clean and put out the teachings? How do you deliver that? Fair. And then it takes a certain amount of intelligence, which is buddhi, right? Which is a yoga process itself, to balance the economics with the integrity, with why we're doing this. So, and then just energetically, that's the integrity part. An exchange is clean, very clear. And to say that is $10 and you do this is a very clean exchange. It's not, I'll do this and sometime later you'll owe me. No, okay? So let it just be very clear up front. And it sounds like that's what you're doing. I like that, okay? Oh, my old friend Alex is on there. Hello. Nice photo, Alex. I missed your wedding, but next time. Okay. Well, I think that's it. There's a bunch of other things. If they come up in other questions. What do we got now? Oh, I still have 3. My producers, even though I'm alone here, are telling me I still have 3 minutes. Marika Dijkstra. How can I build up my chaturangas again after a back injury and a safe transition from my back to upper dog? Yeah, well, we have a whole program on, how to do like the push-up chaturanga, and you start with your knees and you just do a very small bend, But if you do that regularly, it's just like with headstand. You go up for 30 seconds, but if you did it every day, then you'd be doing 3 minutes before you know it. If you don't do it every day, then 30 seconds always remains your level, and it's a little bit tough. Okay? So, and remember, chaturanga can be with the knees down and a partial bend, and that's enough. Okay? Though if you take a look at Yogi Burpee, you might not want to do that one. Okay? Anyway, I hope your back gets better, Marika. To save it in up dog, you need to, very much do lower abdomen Uddiyana to keep the tailbone pulling down, so that there's less and hopefully no compression in the lower back. I did do a video. I think we have it up online already, right? Of how I'll take care of my back, because I got 6 lumbar vertebrae, and so really need to manage that compressed area. So go watch the video. Do that. You feel heat arising. Hello, Maria. You feel heat arising up the body to neck, ears when doing Ujjayi Pranayama at a 1-2-2. But other times it's fine. Again, is it after something else? And are you overdoing perhaps the Mula Bandha hold? So those are things you probably have to look at and observe your pulse. But if you don't feel any other discomfort, then that's your kind of personal light to tread the path with. Okay. I feel that heat, but how's my overall system? I'm okay. At the moment it's hard for me to get other input and advice, so let me monitor how my system feels and not just do things and push on with them, because that won't help. Okay. And if it does continue a lot, just let me know. Bella, how would you help a pranayama from people suffering from PTSD, for those who are triggered by sexual abuse and it's impossible to connect with the pelvic? So I didn't read the question in advance, so I just read it there, but let's get back to that one. It almost needs its own topic. Okay. Okay, so one last question, and then I'm done. Okay. So, Jessica's saying to me that at times it's nice to stay at home, but when it's an endless, meaning there's no end in sight, staying at home, it actually starts to feel stressful. And probably all the parents are feeling the same. So how could my family and I do it? Any suggestions? Well, a lot of this really comes down to how you frame it, perspective-wise. I hope there's some outlet to get out, and nowadays it's get out for a walk. I was in Atlanta in that situation, and now bang, I'm here in this situation. Here I have a more nature outlet, which is a saving grace, I think. Everything's shut down, everyone's isolated, you name it, in all the places. And I'm pretty much isolated at home doing the academic work, but I was going to be doing that anyway. So thanks, rest of the world, for joining me in my isolation. However, regardless of what is causing that isolation, you need personal breaks, right? And a personal break without other distractions. You're probably going to take a break and put on headphones and listen to podcasts or music or something else. Enough. Just go out, and now that there is less pollution and traffic sounds and all that, listen to sounds that makes you present. Literally change what's going on in your brain, so you come back at least with some relief. And then this is almost its own meditative practice. Become comfortable with not knowing. That is actually what Ishvara Pranidhana is. Yeah, you don't have to believe in any deity, God form, this or that, right? Because all of that is unknown. I don't know. So instead, I can trust and surrender in the unknown. And it's come up many times, at least for me personally, where whoa, look at all this changing, and I don't know. So then I learn to trust in the I don't know. Okay, and so this will shift at some point. We just don't know when. Okay, I can be comfortable with that. If not, that's something I need to contemplate on, and it could be a topic as you go out for your walks. And pratipaksha bhavanam, you flip things. So if you are stuck at home with the kids, that is that can be so you can also flip it into perhaps which kids will love, certain creative challenges, etc. But I hear you and I feel for you. I fully understand. On the positive, we're all in the same boat. So reflect on it. Really learn how to trust in not knowing, and enjoy nature. Okay. So I think it was great to really have this platform, and next week, this time, live at Samahita, alone at Samahita, I'll have my good friends, well, let's see who they are, 2 people that maybe some people know. We'll do a kind of a, let's just fool around in the beginning, but then let's have a few serious questions after that. So we'll have a little like triple discussion going on. And then have a good weekend. We will be getting you to join in, and that should answer Jessica's question as well. Do the Yoga Burpee Challenge, and that should help you at home, being stuck inside. And I look forward to speaking again.